In the scriptural justice system, the highest of the high, the Most High, Yah, is the judge and jury, and the seed of Israel are his children. These are their stories. Season 1, Episode 3, 70 AD, The Scattering. Fade in. A massive map of the Roman Empire, 70 AD, covers the entire wall. Red pins mark Jerusalem. Black pins radiate outward in all directions. Banks stands with a marker, Riley at the computer, Okafor holding ancient texts, Chen taking notes. Banks, September 70 AD, Titus's legions breach the walls of Jerusalem. The temple burns. Blood runs in the streets. She marks the map. Josephus, our primary eyewitness, says over 1 million dead, nearly 100,000 taken captive to Rome. But here's what most people don't know. She circles the date, 67 AD. The siege began 3 years earlier, and between 67 and 70 AD, thousands fled. They saw it coming. Riley, Matthew 24, Jesus warned them, "When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, flee to the mountains." Okafor and flee they did, but which direction? Banks draws arrows on the map. Banks north, that's Roman territory. Syria, Asia Minor, you're running into the empire's arms. Chen east, Banks Parthian Empire. Also hostile, also dangerous. Over west is the Mediterranean. Unless you have ships, that leaves south. She traces the route with red marker, down from Jerusalem through the Negev into the Sinai into Egypt. The same route their ancestors took during famines. Abraham did it. Jacob did it. They knew Egypt, and Egypt had a massive Hebrew population already. Riley, pulling up data? Alexandria, Egypt, 1st century. Estimated Hebrew population 500,000. Entire districts were Hebrew. They had synagogues, schools, their own quarter. Okafor, Philo of Alexandria, Hebrew philosopher, lived there. He wrote extensively about the community. They weren't visitors. They were established. Banks. So when the refugees from Jerusalem arrive, they're not strangers. They're coming home. How long did they stay? That's the question, because Egypt doesn't stay safe. She marks new dates on the timeline, 115 to 117 AD. The Khitos War. Roman Emperor Trajan orders a crackdown on Hebrew populations across North Africa. Alexandria is devastated, hundreds of thousands killed or scattered. Riley, where do they go? Banks traces the map south, past Egypt, into Nubia, into Ethiopia, west along the North African coast. Banks deeper into Africa, following trade routes, following safety. Okafor stands before a digital display showing ancient trade routes crisscrossing Africa. Okafor. People think Africa was isolated, primitive, no connection to the ancient world. That's colonial propaganda. She highlights routes in gold. Trans-Saharan trade routes, thousands of years old, gold, salt, ivory, textiles. These routes connected West Africa to North Africa, to the Middle East, to the Mediterranean. Riley. So Hebrew refugees could travel them. Could and did. Look at this. She pulls up archaeological evidence. Hebrew inscriptions found in modern-day Mali, Nigeria, Ghana. Hebrew script, dated between 500 to 1500 AD, found in West Africa. Could be traders, merchants passing through. Or communities, settlements, people who came and stayed. She clicks to another image, a stone tablet with 10 Commandments inscriptions, found in Nigeria. Someone was teaching Torah there. Banks. Not someone. The refugees. The scattered tribes. She joins Okafor at the screen. Pull up the linguistic evidence. Riley types. A comparison chart appears. Hebrew versus West African languages. Igbo, Nigeria. God. Hebrew. Chai. Living. Igbo. Ezi. King. Hebrew. Ezer. Help aid. Yoruba. Oba. Hebrew. Av. Father authority. Akan Adonai. Lord. Riley, those are too close to be coincidence. Okafor linguistic retention. When people migrate, language travels with them. Morphs, adapts, but core words remain. Banks, especially religious words, words for God, king, covenant, those don't change easily. But this could be from Islamic influence. Arabs traded in West Africa, Okafor. Islam arrived in West Africa around 800 AD. Some of these practices predate that, and they're not Islamic, they're explicitly Hebrew. She pulls up anthropological studies. The Igbo of Nigeria, oral tradition says they migrated from the east from the land of Israel. They practice circumcision on the 8th day, exactly as commanded in Genesis. Riley, Muslims circumcised too. Okafor, not on the 8th day. That's specifically Hebrew. Igbo also have kosher-like dietary laws, observe a Sabbath, have a concept of ritual purity and claim descent from the tribe of Gad. Banks, the Lemba people of Zimbabwe and South Africa. DNA testing in the 1990s showed they carry the Cohen modal haplotype, the genetic marker of the Hebrew priestly line. Wait, genetic proof? Yeah. Published in Nature, 2000, study by Dr. Tudor Parfit. The Lemba have been saying for centuries they're descended from Hebrews. Everyone dismissed it as myth. Then the DNA came back. Priestly lineage, authenticated, silence, Chen. So there were Hebrews in Africa. Banks, not were. Present tense. Communities exist today. They've been there for nearly 2,000 years. Banks projects the list on screen. African Hebrew communities, documented. Lemba, Zimbabwe, South Africa. Igbo, Nigeria. Bay Israel, Ethiopia, recognized by Israel. Abai, Uganda. House of Israel, Ghana. Rusapa, Zimbabwe. Sefwi, Cape Verde Islanders. Banks. These aren't fringe groups. These are large, established communities, some numbering in the millions, with centuries of oral tradition claiming Hebrew ancestry. Okafor, the Beta Israel Ethiopian Hebrews, were airlifted to Israel in Operations Moses and Solomon in the 1980s and 90s. Israel recognized them as legitimate Hebrews. Because they're African Hebrews, exactly. But they're not the only ones. They're just the only ones Israel acknowledged. Because acknowledging the others, especially the ones who were enslaved, raises uncomfortable questions. She clicks to a new slide, a timeline. 70 AD, Jerusalem falls 100 to 400 AD, migration into Africa 400 to 1400 AD, establishment of communities 1500s, European contact begins, 1502, transatlantic trade begins. Banks. The Hebrew communities are in place, settled, practicing their faith, keeping their traditions, for over 1,000 years. Riley, and then the ships come, and then the ships come. Evidence room. Night, Riley works alone again, surrounded by slave trade manifests and ship logs. He cross-references ports of departure with locations of Hebrew communities. Riley, Elmina Castle, Ghana, São Tomé, Calabar, Bonny, Luanda. He overlays the maps, Hebrew community locations, slave port locations, they match. He pulls up capture records, translated from Portuguese and Dutch, captured interior tribes, refuse pork, keep strange Sabbath. Stubborn Negroes from wider region, claim royal lineage, will not bow. Traders report these are different stock, educated, literate in strange script. Riley's breath quickens. They knew. The slavers knew they were different. He finds another document, a letter from a Dutch trader, 1640. These are not like the others. They have laws, they have judges among them. They speak of a God who delivered their fathers from bondage. Ironic, considering their current station. Riley prints everything. His hands shake. Bullpen, early morning. Banks arrives. Riley is already there, looking haunted. They documented it. The slave traders, they wrote it down. He spreads the documents across the table. The enslaved Africans weren't random. They targeted specific regions where Hebrew communities lived. Will not eat swine, strange Sabbath, claim descent from Eastern kings. She looks up. They were capturing Hebrews, on purpose. Riley, or at minimum capturing populations that included Hebrews, and when they got to the Americas, they stripped everything. Language, names, culture, religion. Made them forget who they were. Entering with coffee. What's going on? We found the connection. Hebrew communities in West Africa. Slave raids in the same regions. Documents showing the enslaved people practiced Hebrew customs, Chenan. So Deuteronomy 28:68 is literal. They were literally brought back into bondage by ships. Banks verse by verse, prophecy by prophecy. It's all there. She walks to the board, writes, track the scattering. 70 AD, Jerusalem falls. 100 to 400 AD, migration into Africa. 400 to 1500 AD, establishment of Hebrew communities. 1502 to 1865, enslavement and deportation via ships. Now we need eyewitness accounts. We need to hear from the enslaved people themselves. What did they remember? What did they pass down? Riley WPA Slave Narratives, 1930s. Federal Writers Project interviewed over 2,000 formerly enslaved people. Okafor, I'll pull those records. Okafor scrolls through digital archives. Page after page of testimony. She stops, reads one aloud. Okafor, interview with Sylvia King, age 87, Virginia, 1937. My granddaddy say we was Hebrew people. Say we don't eat the swine, keep the Sabbath. Say we was took from our land across the water. But nobody listened to the old folks no more. She continues scrolling. Finds another. Okafor. Interview with Anthony Dawson, age 93, Georgia, 1936. Old folks say we come from Jerusalem way back. Say we was kings and priests, but then the white man come with chains. Another. Interview with Rebecca Brown, age 81, South Carolina, 1938. Granny kept the seventh day. Wouldn't work Saturday. Got whipped for it. Say it was the law from the Almighty. Okafor's voice cracks. She wipes her eyes. They remembered. They tried to tell people, but no one believed them. Banks sits across from Professor Kenneth Bradford, 70s white, southern accent historian specializing in American slavery. Banks, Professor Bradford, you've studied slave narratives for 40 years. Bradford, yes, ma'am. Banks, ever notice the repeated references to Hebrew identity? Pause. Bradford, some mentions, yes. Some mentions. I found over 200 testimonies explicitly stating Hebrew origin, Sabbath-keeping, avoidance of pork, claims of descent from Jerusalem. Enslaved people were often taught Christianity. Christianity doesn't explain seventh-day Sabbath. Christianity moved the Sabbath to Sunday. These people kept Saturday, like the Hebrews. Bradford could be Seventh-day Adventist influence. Banks in the 1700s. Before that denomination existed? Try again. Silence. You ignored it, didn't you? You read those testimonies and dismissed them. I seemed confused. Confused or inconvenient, because if enslaved Africans were actually the biblical Hebrews, then everything about American slavery takes on a different dimension. Detective, you're asking me to rewrite centuries of scholarship. Banks, I'm asking you to acknowledge what the primary sources actually say. Those people told you who they were. You didn't listen. She slides a document across the table. Testimony after testimony. We was Hebrew people. We come from Israel. We kept the law. It's right there, in your archives, in the research you published. If I had acknowledged it, no one would have believed me. Banks. So you buried it. Bradford, I bury. The team gathers. Bradford's confession recorded and playing. Bradford's voice. I knew. We all knew. Every historian who worked with those narratives saw it. But if we said it out loud, we'd be laughed out of academia, ostracized. So we just didn't talk about it. Chen stops the recording. He admitted to academic fraud, to suppressing evidence. Not just him. Generations of historians, all keeping the same secret. Okafor. Because acknowledging it would mean, she writes on the board, implications. 1. American slavery was enslavement of biblical Hebrews. 2. The curses of Deuteronomy 28 were fulfilled. 3. So-called African Americans are the covenant people. 4. The identity theft is global. 5. Reparations aren't just owed, they're biblically mandated. Riley, the entire power structure flips. Banks, exactly. So they buried it, called it folklore, dismissed it as confused slaves mixing up their religion. Chen, but the evidence is overwhelming. Yes. And we're going to present it. Every piece. She turns to the timeline. Episode 4. We document the Hebrew communities in Africa before the slave trade. We show they were there. We show what they practiced. We prove they weren't random Africans. They were Israelites, living in exile, waiting, scattered but not lost. Riley, until the ships came. Banks stands alone looking over the city. Chen joins her. You okay? This is bigger than I thought. When I started this unit, I thought we'd investigate stolen artifacts, falsified documents. And instead, we're uncovering the biggest cover-up in human history, the deliberate erasure of an entire people's identity for 2,000 years. You think people will believe it? Some will. Some won't. Some will fight it with everything they have because their entire worldview depends on it being false. Chen, what do we do about that? Banks, we keep building the case. Document everything. Let the evidence speak. She turns to him. Because somewhere out there are people who've been told their whole lives they're nothing, that they descended from savages, that their ancestors were just cargo. And they deserve to know the truth. Banks, they deserve to know they're the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that their ancestors kept the covenant even in chains, that they survived the worst attempt at genocide in history. She looks out over the city, again. They deserve to know they're the chosen people. Fade out. Screen text. Between 70 AD and 1500 AD, Hebrew communities established themselves throughout Africa, particularly in West, Central, and East Africa. These communities maintained Hebrew practices, oral traditions, and cultural markers for over a millennium. When European slave traders arrived in the 1500s, many of these communities were in the direct path of the slave raids. Deuteronomy 28:64, "And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other." This is not theory. This is documented history. End of episode 3.